You're sitting on your couch, phone in hand, watching a video someone sent you. A soldier walks through an airport terminal. A dog goes still, then explodes into motion, and a child screams a name you can't quite make out over the crowd noise. Your chest tightens, your eyes sting, and by the time the soldier drops to his knees and wraps his arms around that kid, you're crying. Actually crying over a stranger's reunion on a stranger's phone screen in a video you didn't even choose to watch. Nothing is wrong. Nothing is threatening you. You are safe, comfortable, sitting in your own home with your own life fully intact, and your body is still producing tears as if something has broken. That's the strange part nobody stops to question. Crying is supposed to mean something is wrong. It's the oldest, most primal signal we have. Pain, loss, danger, help me. And yet here you are, dry-eyed through a stressful commute, dry-eyed through a bad day at work, and suddenly weeping at a wedding toast or a graduation walk or a video of a golden retriever meeting a baby for the first time. Somewhere in your biology, a wire seems to be crossed. And it's not a modern glitch. This exact same malfunction was firing in the chest of a human being 50,000 years ago in a firelit cave, watching someone they loved walk back into camp alive. So the question is simple. Why does the same physical response that signals grief, fear, and pain also show up in your body's single greatest moments of relief and joy? What is crying actually for? And why did evolution let something this seemingly useless survive? Start with the basics, because most people get this part completely wrong. Not all tears are the same tears. Your eyes produce 3 distinct kinds, and only one of them has anything to do with emotion at all. There are basal tears, the thin constant film that keeps your eyeballs from drying out while you read this sentence. There are reflex tears, the ones that flood out when you cut an onion or get shampoo in your eye, a purely mechanical flush response. And then there are what scientists call psychic tears, or emotional tears, and this third category is where things get genuinely strange. In the early 1980s, a biochemist named Dr. William Frey at the University of Minnesota decided to actually test what was inside emotional tears, rather than just assuming they were interchangeable with the other two. What he found surprised almost everyone. Emotional tears carry a noticeably different chemical signature, higher concentrations of stress-related hormones like ACTH, along with natural painkillers called leucine and enkephalin. In plain terms, when you cry from real emotional overwhelm, your body isn't just leaking fluid. It's actively flushing out stress chemistry through your eyes. Nobody had proven that before. Here's the part nobody talks about. As far as researchers can tell, humans are the only species on Earth that reliably does this. Not chimpanzees, not wolves, not elephants, despite decades of viral claims otherwise. Just us. That alone should stop you for a second. A response this specific, this biologically expensive, this uniquely human, evolution doesn't usually keep things around for no reason. So if crying from grief makes sense as a stress release valve, what explains crying from joy? On the surface, it looks like a contradiction. Grief and joy are supposed to be opposites. But your ancestors' brains, and yours, were never actually built to sort emotions into neat opposing categories. They were built to sort intensity. That idea comes from a psychologist named Dr. Oriana Aragon, who ran a study out of Yale in 2015 that reframed the entire question. Aragon and her team noticed that people don't just cry when overjoyed, they also squeeze puppies a little too hard, or say things like, "I could just eat you up," to an adorable baby. She called these dimorphous expressions, emotional reactions that look like they're opposite, crying during joy, aggressive tenderness during cuteness, and her theory was almost embarrassingly simple once you hear it. These reactions aren't contradictions at all, they're regulation. When positive emotion spikes too high, too fast, for your nervous system to comfortably hold, your body reaches for whatever expressive tool is fastest, even if that tool is normally associated with sadness, just to bring you back down to a manageable level. Crying, in this framing, was never really about sadness in the first place. It was always about overwhelm. And happiness, it turns out, can overwhelm you just as completely as grief. Think about that for a second, because it rewires the whole question. Your body isn't confused when you cry at good news. It's doing exactly what it evolved to do, discharging an emotional spike too large to sit quietly inside your chest. But regulation alone doesn't explain why this trait would survive across hundreds of thousands of years of brutal natural selection. A response has to do more than just feel good to persist that long. It has to help you survive. And this is where the story stops being about your nervous system and starts being about your ancestors' entire social world. Picture life on the open savanna, somewhere in eastern Africa, roughly 100,000 years ago. There is no police force, no hospital, no insurance policy, no safety net of any kind beyond the 20 or 30 people standing around your fire. Your survival, quite literally, depends on whether those people trust you and whether you can trust them. And trust is expensive to build and painfully easy to fake. A smile costs nothing, words cost nothing, but genuine tears are almost impossible to summon on command. Try it right now. You can't just decide to cry convincingly in the next 10 seconds. That difficulty is not a flaw. It's the entire point. Tears function as what evolutionary biologists call an honest signal, a costly, hard-to-fake display that proves the emotion behind it is real. When someone in your tribe walked back into camp after being feared dead, lost during a hunt, separated during a river crossing, gone for days longer than expected, and the group broke down crying at the sight of them, that reaction did something practical. It proved the bond was real. It cemented loyalty in a species that had no written contracts, no promises on paper, nothing to hold a group together except felt, visible emotional truth. A tribe that could openly display raw relief at each other's survival was a tribe that stayed together. And a tribe that stayed together lived through the next drought, the next predator, the next brutal winter that a lone individual never could have survived alone. Here's what doesn't make sense until you think about it. Crying at reunion wasn't a private, personal moment for your ancestors the way it might feel for you watching a video alone on your couch. It was a public performance of loyalty broadcast to the entire group in a currency, vulnerability, that could not be counterfeited. Now step inside the brain itself, because the wiring gets even stranger the closer you look. For decades, scientists assumed the brain must have two separate systems, one for processing grief, one for processing joy, running on entirely different circuitry. But neuroimaging research has repeatedly found that the same core structures light up during both overwhelming grief and overwhelming joy. The amygdala, your brain's emotional alarm bell, and the hypothalamus, which helps trigger your body's physical stress responses, don't actually distinguish cleanly between too much bad feeling and too much good feeling. To these ancient structures, intensity is intensity. Your body's job isn't to identify whether an emotion is technically positive or negative. It's to manage the raw voltage running through your system before it becomes dangerous. And crying, chemically speaking, is one of the fastest release valves available. There's a Dutch psychologist named Ad Vingerhoets at Tilburg University who has spent more of his career studying crying than perhaps any other scientist alive, and his research keeps circling back to the same conclusion. In his 2013 book on the subject, he lays out just how uniquely human emotional tears really are. Not simply a byproduct of having eyes and feelings, but a specific evolved behavior tied to something bigger. Complex social bonding, group cohesion, the kind of deep, layered cooperation that no other species on the planet has ever managed to build the way humans did. Vingerhoets' point is almost unsettling once it sinks in. Crying didn't survive because it was useful to you individually. It survived because it was useful to the group you belong to. And for nearly the entirety of human history, the group was the only thing standing between you and death. That reframes crying at a wedding or a graduation or a stranger's video on your phone into something much older and much stranger than sentimentality. You are running software that was built for a world where public tears meant the difference between belonging and being left behind. So widen the lens for a moment, because the deepest part of this answer isn't biochemical at all. It's philosophical. For most of human existence, joy this intense was rare, genuinely rare. A hunting party returning alive after everyone assumed the worst. A child surviving a fever that had already killed 2 others in the group that same year. A birth that didn't kill the mother in an era when it very often did. These weren't small, pleasant moments. They were the exception to a baseline of scarcity, danger, and loss so constant that most humans throughout history buried more children than they raised to adulthood. When something actually went right, truly overwhelmingly right, your ancestors' bodies didn't have a gentle way to process it. There was no mildly pleased. There was only the same nervous system cranked to its absolute ceiling, doing the only thing it knew how to do with an emotion too large to hold quietly. You inherited that exact nervous system. Nothing about it has changed in 50,000 years. The difference is that your version of overwhelmingly right now includes things your ancestors could never have imagined. A stranger's video autoplaying on a 5-inch screen, showing a reunion you have no personal stake in whatsoever. And your body still responds with the full ancient machinery built for life or death relief. That's not a flaw in the system. That's proof the system still works exactly as designed, even when the world around it has changed beyond recognition. Winter came at your ancestors with 4 separate weapons, and their bodies answered every one of them with the same tool. Grief threatened to isolate them, so tears signaled a need for comfort that pulled the group closer. Fear threatened to paralyze them, so tears released the tension before it became dangerous. Overwhelming relief threatened to leave real gratitude unspoken, so tears proved it was genuine when words weren't enough. And joy, the rarest, most fragile thing they ever experienced, threatened to simply be too large to hold inside a single human body, so tears let it out safely, publicly, undeniably. 4 completely different emotional threats, and evolution answered all of them with the exact same drop of salt water rolling down a human face. That's the part that should genuinely humble you. You don't cry at happy moments because something in you is broken or confused. You cry because you are running one of the oldest, most tested pieces of software the human species has ever built. A system so effective at proving loyalty, releasing pressure, and holding fragile communities together that it outlasted ice ages, migrations, famines, and roughly 10,000 generations of people who needed it to work exactly as well as it still works in you today. So go back to that couch. Go back to that soldier walking through the airport, the dog frozen mid-stride, the kid's voice cracking over the noise of the crowd, your eyes stinging, your chest tight, tears rolling down your face over a moment that has absolutely nothing to do with your own life. That reaction isn't sentimental weakness. It's 50,000 years of human beings needing each other to survive, compressed into a single, involuntary, unfakeable drop of water. You're not crying because you're sad, it's happy. You're crying because somewhere deep in your biology, joy this big has always meant the group made it through. And some ancient part of you is still, after everything, keeping count.